Hello, everyone. My name is Zach Driscoll, and welcome to my continuation of my top-down shooter project. New things since last time. I went ahead and created a nav mesh system, which will essentially allow AI enemy units to navigate my current map. So here you can see where the nav mesh has access to. So this lighter blue area that you see here, this is where the enemy can pathfind around. And then these like darker sections right up against these objects is where the AI can't navigate to. So they know to go around these objects because they can't move there. Let's see. Next, I have my enemy spawner here. And so it's a little difficult to see because it's unfortunately pretty small. But here I have, using the gizmo system, I have this little arrow to indicate, or line to indicate which direction this object is facing. This particular object is the enemy spawner, which after a set amount of time will go ahead and spawn one of the enemy prefabs. As for the enemy themselves, they have a bunch of extra colliders compared to the player because they have a ragdoll system in place where essentially these colliders are telling the model that it can move those individual pieces. So like for instance, it knows it can move this part of the arm differently than it will move the upper arm as compared to like say the foot and the lower leg here. And essentially when they spawn, all these extra colliders are turned off along with rigid bodies that they have, so physics will apply to them. And then once their health reaches 0, these all turn on, so that way it will go into ragdoll form and just kind of drop, and then it'll wait a couple seconds and then die. Or it'll destroy the object, I should say. Technically, it dies as soon as it ragdolls. All right. An extra feature that I went ahead and added this time is instead of having the health bars up in the top corners, I went ahead and attached them to the player and enemy objects. So now you can see each individual character's health bar as it will update properly during gameplay. So let's see. Next, I'll go ahead and go through the scripts a little bit. So this is the ragdoll controller, which handles turning on and off those colliders I mentioned just a minute ago. It looks pretty messy, but it's honestly pretty simple. Basically, I have functions to determine when those colliders and rigid bodies are on or off, and then a function to toggle it between the two. And then, yeah, I can swap between them. Here on my spawner script, this is the function that I use to create that that little line I pointed out. Here's the health script that I've slightly modified. And this is essentially just knowing to recognize when the player is at 0 health, that it'll respawn the player and reset their health bar. And then still invoke the on die. So if it's not the player, or if you want the player to have on die effects, it still will automatically do that no matter what if the current health is less than or equal to 0. Here on the player controller, the only minor difference is I did add a respawn mechanic. Right now, it's a little tricky to handle destroying the player and then reinstantiating it after they have died. So for the time being, I essentially trick the player into thinking that they die and respawn. So I just reset their position to be where I have the player's respawner object. Eventually, I would like to change this to where it does actually destroy the player and reset them, or do something along those lines. But at least for the purpose of working on respawning, I believe this meets the requirements. Then I have the AI minion script. So this is handling everything that the AI enemy is going to do. Eventually, I might have other AI enemy types in the game, and so I'll have to make a separate script that might do some of these same things but tweak it a little. But essentially, it has access to their pawn, a nav mesh agent, which handles it, how it knows where to move, as well as reference to the player, so that way it knows what to look for. Under normal circumstances, the AI is going to essentially be perfect with less code. So for instance, as you know, if I didn't have, like, if I had just made a very simple AI and told it, okay, find the player and shoot. Well, it's always going to shoot as fast as possible, and it's always going to follow the player nonstop with just absolute perfection, because that's all the computer knows to do. So in order to make this feel more fair and realistic, we have these different variables to help modify their shooting. So that way they have chances of missing, they won't shoot as like super fast, and that kind of thing. So then, let's see. Basically, I always tell it to try and find the player at all times. Once it can find the player, it's going to try and shoot ahead of them, because the player's always going to be moving. They're not going to be, usually they're not going to be a sitting target. So I try to have the AI know to try and shoot a little bit ahead of where the player's location is. So this function is just managing like how far ahead of the player's position to shoot. And then this is just telling it to shoot at the player while also applying those modifiers to try and make it not be a perfect shot every time. And then here I have a simple little timer to give it some sort of firing delay, so that way it's not shooting as fast as inhumanly possible, I guess. And then always telling it to rotate towards and move to the player. Making sure that the AI's animations are acknowledged between the nav mesh agent and the pawn's animation controller. Here, I just have a simple, respawn event to invoke, so I can do stuff on when they respawn, as well as a simple die function where the game object will be destroyed after 2 seconds. I went ahead and applied these 2 seconds, that way there's time to see the enemy ragdoll before they actually die or get destroyed. So now I'll go ahead and play test this. Okay, so here, just gonna go ahead and grab a weapon. And then here's the enemy. It knows to not stop right on top of the player. It'll stop a short distance away. And it does follow me everywhere, rotating towards me. And as you can see, it still uses proper animations just like the player does. Now, if I go ahead and kill it, it ragdolls and then gets destroyed. And then it respawns. And if it picks up a weapon, it can start shooting at me. Here, I'll go ahead and lead it to a weapon that does a little bit more damage. All right, so now I'm gonna let it kill me. Here. When I die, I just get reset to here, and my health is back up. And then boom. This is a slight glitch where the gun will still shoot at me when it technically dies. That is something I need to figure out how to fix in the future. But that is everything I've got for you today. So thank you very much for watching, and have yourselves a fantastic day.